Hi, Laura.
So
How are you?
everything's good.
Listen, we have some amazing wines here. The Nicola Catena Zapata reds from 2003, 4, 10, 15, 16, 17. Let's like rock through these wines
Yes.
and try them out. So remind me about 2003. What sort of vintage was it like?
Yeah. So 2003 was on the cool side, but we did have a frost that reduced yields. So it was a little bit of an early harvest. It's a very tannic vintage. So the Cabernet from this vintage is somehow more tannic than other vintages. It might be the water stress. We're actually not completely sure, but it's a vintage that's taking a long time to age. There's a lot of sotobosque. There's a lot of this kind of
Yes.
earthiness on the vintage, and it was more that was the characteristic for both Cab and Malbec, but it was even more marked in the Cab. This is 72% Cab and 28% Malbec.
It has a nice herbal character to it. And now with the
Absolutely,
age, it's coming across with some mushrooms and
yeah.
it's holding on beautifully.
This vintage was super tight. For several years, we had to decant it, and now I think it's really kind of starting. It's almost not even. I feel like it's not even at its prime, but it's much more open and beautiful, and I feel like the acidity and that grip is now very attractive.
Now go to the 2004. How
Okay.
was 4 compared to 3 then?
Yeah, so four is a much warmer vintage. I would say four was a very classic Mendoza vintage, warm, lots of sun, just the usual little like rains 1 or 2 days in the summer, which is normal, but nothing lengthy. There was no rot. Everything was in perfect shape. The yields, were, I wouldn't say high, but on the higher side, whereas '03 and then 10 are on the much lower side. I think it's a very generous vintage. The tannins are sweet, and you can really, even if this wine is, only 22% Malbec, I feel like although the nose is more cabby, the palate is almost like it feels like it's 100% Malbec.
I
Um,
totally agree. That roundness,
yeah,
richness, but at the same time, it's not heavy. It's just very luscious and
yeah,
plush and delicious and really shows classic Mendoza style,
yeah,
particularly in a Malbec fleshy style, but not heavy. It's
yeah,
really beautiful now. I prefer it to the '03 just because
yeah.
it's more, generous and ripe and
I agree.
gorgeous.
Like this is a complete wine that's ready to drink. And just remember that, this these blends come from all cool climate vintages. So even when I'm saying, it was a slightly warm year, we're talking Winkler Zone 1 and 2, and maybe like a warm 2 to 3, which would be like Napa. So we're still talking places that are between Bordeaux and Napa and a little bit of
Mhm.
Burgundy, which, is
Okay.
crazy how it is in Argentina. So it's still warm, is not that warm.
Okay. So now
Yeah.
we're on to the 10.
Yeah, so 10 was a fairly cool vintage, although you were about to have, like, 16 is way cooler than anything we've ever seen. So 10 was a cool small vintage. We had a very big frost in the Altamira region in the southern part of the Uca Valley. So the harvest was a little early on the cool side, much cooler than the '04, and pretty low yields. But for some reason, the 10 is interesting because the tannins are very sweet and smooth, but the wines are big, but without, that there's no harsh tannins either, even if it was a cool vintage. So everything ripened well, maybe because the yields were lower. I'm not sure.
What I like about it too is there's a real firmness and transparency, and I can see. I don't know if you changed something in the winemaking or it's the vintage, but it has a little bit more precision than the 2003 or 2004.
I would say that the one thing is we started to do a lot more co-fermentation and whole cluster.
Hmm.
And I think that what that has done is to increase the texture and the kind of like the blendiness. Like the 10, there's nothing disjointed about it. It's
No,
You know what I'm saying? Like it's
Totally.
big, it's mineral, it's fruit, but everything's together. And I think that the co-fermentation and the whole cluster may have contributed to that. And that's why Alejandro is now like, he co-ferments everything and does a cluster with everything. He's like,
yeah, I know. It works.
You know, Burgundian style Bordeaux blend. That's his thing.
Yeah. It's really a beautiful wine and drinking beautifully, but has years ahead of it as well.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you that the 10 is it's a bigger wine, has a lot more structure than the 4. As delicious as the 4 is, the 10 is a bigger wine.
So now we're on to the 15.
Yes.
Tell us about 15.
Yeah. So 15, we have nicknamed it the Bordeaux year because it rained a lot, and I was a little worried calling it bad because I don't want to say it in a bad term, but it rained a lot. But fortunately, because it was relatively cool, we didn't really have rot. Usually you get rot when it rains and then it's warm and super sunny. So it was fairly cool and actually cloudy. So we didn't get a lot of rot, but we got this really slow ripening. And the 15 is very minimal. I feel like the 10 is sort of more generous and round. And to me, the 15 is a little more linear. With like some graphite and some of these more, sort of Saint-Emilion kind of characteristics.
Yes. Wasn't that the vintage when there was a lot of rain at the end of the harvest, or was that 16?
So that was 16. So 16 was the year that if you harvested late, if you had too much fruit and you weren't, we basically missed it because we harvested, 90% of our grapes, or we were already harvesting them when the rain came. And then when the rain hit, we went and ran and harvested whatever was left, but we already had most of our good grapes in. If you had really, a lot of fruit or you were playing on late ripening, kind of like what they do in California, that they harvest really late. If you were doing that, it was the bad year to do it.
That's right, I remember.
Yeah.
It was really wet and cold at the end.
I know. People were really thinking, this is not South America.
Yeah, it was nutty. But let's taste it.
So, yeah, the 16.
But like you say, it has richness. It's actually richer than the 15, but at the same time, they're just different styles. But I really, really like it, as always.
Yeah. I would say that, for me, the 16, it's very different than the other wines.
So really, that's the influence of those two cold and wet years. So 17 is going to be good to move into, because then 17 you have a very hot vintage.
Yeah, so 17 is hot. However, we had a big zonda. So after we had small vintage, 14, 15, 16. So we're all waiting for, okay, please give us some grapes. And 17 starts warmer. It wasn't super warm, but it was warm, a lot warmer than 16. There's no rain. And then we get the zonda. And so the yields are way down. So it's warmer, but with very low yields. And just remember, this is the great thing about the Uco Valley is you've been there. You've seen all those stones covered in calcareous. If you have rain, it gets sucked in and it's gone. And if you have heat, it's still cool climate. So it's kind of a protector from the bad things that can happen. And in the 17, the one big difference from the 15 and the 16 is that we only used fruit from Paraje Altamira, from our Nicasia vineyard, and from Gualtajari, from Adriana. We stopped using La Pirámide, the clay soils. Yes. And part of it is that, these vineyards are now, Adriana and Nicasia are, 35 plus years old. And we felt that when you said the precision, you used a word that I don't remember. Precision,
transparency.
With La Pirámide, we had, older vines. Those vines are like, 45, 50 years old, the clay soils, but it's a warmer climate. And we felt that we weren't getting the precision that we needed. Yeah. And so for the 17, we used only cool climate fruit, and the slightly warmer is gone. And we think we're going to keep it that way.
That's really interesting to me because we didn't really discuss this. And, you know, I see you every year in Argentina for the last 5 years, but you never told me that. And what's great about this tasting, you really see that. Where in the beginning, you're getting that more typical ripe fruit that I think the Malbec brings. And then now then we had the cooler years, 15, 16, where it became more linear and precise, more herbaceous in a good sense, tobacco. And then now we've got into the 17, which has the Gualtari, minerality, blue fruits, and super fresh acidity and polished tannins. And I really think that the quality, the 17 is the best Catena Zapata Nicola that you've made, in my opinion, because of that sort of really polished and beautiful, you know, structure, moving away from that more flamboyant, soft. You know, it's a very serious wine, and I didn't know that that's because you're using those cooler fruit areas.
Only those cooler fruit. And the other thing that I think also has an impact is that for those last 15, 16, and 17, there's Cab Franc. And I think that the Cab Franc brings, you know, some acidity and lift to the Malbec. And that's something that, you know, Alejandro is, as you know, he's a huge fan of Cab Franc, and he co-ferments both the Cab Franc with the Cab, with the Cab Franc with the Malbec. He does. And I think the Cab Franc is I think it's two explanations. One is what we were just saying, you know, even if 17 was a warmer vintage, we only use cool climate fruit. But I think the Cab Franc is also part of that, the more precise and the you know, instead of trying to be generous, it's like, you know, beautifully linear in a very elegant way. And I'm actually so excited that you see it, because I didn't even say anything and you said it to me, which is a lot more exciting.
Exciting for me. Well, listen, thank you so much for the tasting.
Thank you.
It was a great way for me to start the morning. And thank you for staying up relatively late in San Francisco.
Hey, James, just two things I wanted to emphasize, which I have found that the negociants didn't know about Argentina, and they're all going crazy with this information. The fact that all of the vines for all these vintages are ungrafted. You know, you know that because you come to Argentina. They don't know that in Bordeaux. Everything's ungrafted. And also, the Malbec and the Cab selections are pre-phylloxeric. So we're talking about selections that no longer exist in Europe, not just for Malbec, also for Cabernet. And that's really I don't know if you're interested in mentioning that, but that's something that the negociants seem very surprised and excited by.
I don't know. Thanks for reminding me, but it's very true. You have the stuff that they don't have anymore. So
there you go.
Well, thanks again, Laura. It was awesome. Thanks for the
Thank you.
And thanks for the tasting. Tú también. Gracias. Nos vemos la próxima. Besos.